There are a lot of cinema lenses out there, and at the top end you have the likes of the ARRI Signature Prime set, where a 6 lens set will set you back $175,000. I mean, who has that kind of money, right? Don't get me wrong, they are amazing lenses that we would all dream of using. But what if you wanted all of the great features that a cinema lens set brings, such as declicked apertures, fast T-stops, geared focus rings with hard stops, amazing bokeh, and what if you only wanted to pay, let's say about £1,000? That would sound pretty good, right? Well, let me introduce to you. So what I have here is a 5 lens set of Mark II Samyang Cine lenses. These were bought individually for around £200 per lens secondhand. You can purchase a 5 or 6 lens set from around £2,000 to £3,000 online new, which is a lot more money, and however I would actually recommend getting these secondhand on places like eBay and Facebook Marketplace, granted that they are in full working order and are without any dust or fungus. So what do you get in a 5 lens set like this? So I have a 16mm, 24mm, 35mm, 50mm and 85mm, which are all T1.5 with the exception of the 16mm, which is a T2.2. You can also purchase a 14mm T3.1, which is what you'll usually receive as the wide angle in the pre-assembled sets you get online. However, the 14mm doesn't stop down anywhere near as much as the 16, which is why I opted for the 16mm. Another advantage of getting them separate is that you can kind of cherry pick which lenses you prefer or need. There is also a 135mm T2.2 lens available as well, but for cinematography, this isn't a lens that I would choose often, which is basically why I didn't go for it. Now, obviously these lenses get blown out of the water by the ARRIs, but that doesn't mean to say that they aren't excellent lenses. I feel like in this lens set here, you have enough coverage for all types of scenarios, and each lens has plenty of character all by itself. So let's take a quick look at how some of these lenses look compared to each other, and I'm going to pair them with my 6K Pro, as I do love shooting on Super 35. However, this will mean that there is a crop factor of 1.55 times, which is something that you should consider when thinking about purchasing lenses, as they will look different across Super 35 and full frame. Okay, so jumping back into everybody's favorite software, Premiere Pro, we can start looking at how these lenses come out with the 6K Pro, which I have already mentioned is Super 35, so there will be a crop factor, but it is important to note that these lenses will also work with full frame cameras like the FX3. You can get these in EF, I believe, Sony E mount, and I think they also do a Nikon mount as well. I'm not too sure, but do your research before purchasing. So this is the 16mm T2.2. If you look closely, you'll see that there is not a lot of blur between this front lens and the back lens, even when stopped down to T2.2. You also see some very, very small bokeh balls in the background. However, even if we go slightly out of center frame, even over here, you can see that they are forming these cat's eye-like shapes pretty early on, which is not ideal and is obviously more characteristic of a cheaper lens. You'd kind of expect this shape more out here, but still looks pretty good overall, nice and wide. And also if you venture further out frame towards this cushion kind of area over here, you'll see quite a lot of chromatic aberration forming towards the edge of the frame. However, this isn't evident in the center of frame here, like in this one. It's not the sharpest of lenses, I will say. The writing on this lens is not that legible, to be honest, compared to some of the longer focal lengths in this range. But it also is important to note that there is no distortion when using this on Super 35. There's no like curvature. There's no like fish-eyeing, to be honest. This will probably be more evident in a full frame lens, but with the guide here, you'll see the table does remain straight. So yeah, pretty funky lens. I do like to use this for like POV shots, or if you have to showcase a wide area like a landscape or city buildings, for example. It will be pretty cool to use this lens on like a front-facing POV. Do you know, you do those kind of like chest rig, chest mount type things. That's where I can see this lens working the best. So if we move on to our 24mm lens, we can see that we are getting a lot more blur from our subject to the background. And we are getting some nicely sized bokeh balls in the background. So you can see here, they do have some aberrations around the edge. There is quite a lot of grain in this image, but that's because I'm using the 6K Pro, which is quite a grainy camera. And when we go further afield from the center of the lens, you can see that there's not actually much distortion in the shape of these bokeh balls, which is good. This lens is actually quite a lot sharper than the previous lens. You can see, oh, we're in a bit too close here. You can see that the writing on this lens is a lot more legible, and overall this is a pretty sweet lens. I don't use this lens as much as I should. I'll either go for the 16 or the 35. Obviously the 35 is my favorite lens, but with this lens you can use this for your wide shot on an interview, for example, or I feel like you could use it for some top-down kind of imagery, but a great lens nonetheless. And moving on to my favorite lens of the bunch is the 35mm, and we can see already that we're getting some nice blur in the background lenses. There's some slight blurring in the second lens here, which is good. It's not absolutely blown out like this one here. And if you see, the bokeh balls are nice and spherical. They have a little bit of chromatic aberrations around the edge, which I don't mind. I kind of like that personally. I have shot the entirety of a film on this lens. Obviously, if you haven't seen that, check that out. It's on my channel called Sector 12. Shot it all on this Samyang 35mm because with the crop factor of the 6K Pro of 1.55x, it kind of makes this feel like a 50mm lens, which everyone knows the nifty 50 is probably one of the nicest lenses you can use for a film. It's just kind of got that natural looking feeling where there's no distortion. It's just kind of that nice focal length, which is why I use this lens, and yeah, it was great. One of my favorite lenses of the set. And moving on is the actual 50mm. So I don't really use this lens that much either. It's kind of like the 24mm. It's between 35 and the 85, and I'll kind of go for one of those two just to get that contrast between shots. But this is a very nice and sharp lens nonetheless. Obviously you can see the writing is nice and sharp. Obviously the focal length helps with that and actually being closer to the image. But if we look at our second lens here, you can see it is very, very blurred. Obviously this one is even more so blurred and is very, you couldn't really tell what this was by looking at it if you hadn't seen it beforehand, which is kind of useful for some things. But looking at the bokeh balls, they are perfectly spherical and nice size as well. They kind of give that kind of like dreamy look in the background, and obviously there is so much blur in the background that you cannot see a thing at all. So this is kind of useful when you want to shoot talking heads and you need to blow out a background completely. Like I said, I don't use this lens enough, but I think looking at this image I will use it more in the future. And finally is our 85mm. This is an extraordinary lens. I love using this lens for portraits and talking heads. Obviously in the background the bokeh balls are absolutely huge. They are like twice the size of the 50s. You will notice that they are looking about the same size, these lenses in this image. That is because the 85mm has a close focus of 0.6mm, meaning that I had to move the table back, which is why they look similar in distance. However, obviously bokeh is very different, and there is just that slight bit more blur to the lens on the right here compared to the 50mm. This is the perfect lens for talking heads to use as your close-up, and I'll use something like this lens and probably the 35mm to shoot a 2-camera talking head interview, like Netflix kind of style, which I'm sure you've seen quite a lot, and obviously they work perfectly together. So let's go for a little recap of the focal length. So the 16, 24, the 35, 50 and the 85, and if we play it like this, they kind of look pretty cool zooming in. But thanks for watching this little segment, and I will hand back over to past me to outro the video. So here is a real world scenario in which I used the 35mm lens. This was on my 6K Pro and also on a DJI Ronin RS2. I did also have somebody pulling focus for me remotely via the Tilter Nucleus Nano and DJI Raven transmission. And I have to say, it was a dream to shoot on this lens. The hard stops made it very easy to calibrate the tilter motor, as having a lens that focuses to infinity makes it very difficult to do. I mainly shot everything at t2.8, and it gave me some really smooth blur in my background alongside some really nice subject separation. And the flares don't look too bad either. It was really great to be able to stop down to t1.5 for lower light situations as well, which meant I could stay at my camera's native ISO of 400 to achieve maximum dynamic range. I have used all of these lenses many times in real world scenarios, filming talking heads, dramas, brand films and even product videos, and they have never let me down as they're so robust and versatile across the focal range. So if you were in the market for a cheap cinema lens set, or even if you wanted just one or two lenses, then I think the Samyang Cine lens set is probably for you. But I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. And if you had any opinions of your own about these lenses, please let me know in the comment section down below. And I'll see you next time.